kind of video. It is me, Lord Sci-Fi, and we are back with episode 12 of Obi-Wan and Anakin of Revenge of the Sith novel. This one is Obi-Wan and Anakin 2. It's literally what it's called. Chapter 7, Obi-Wan and Anakin 2. So I just copied this picture and I just renamed it to Chapter 7. We're going to read this. Right? I'm going to just find the pages to the next chapter. Oh, frick. And then I'll put my little card there, because I'm going to be reading to that chapter. So technically it's less than 10 pages. Technically it's more. Well, I'm not sure. We're going to read now. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi in the light, and he's prodded onto the bridge along with Anakin and Chancellor Palpatine. He has no need to look around to see the banks of control consoles tended by terrified Neimoidians. He doesn't have to turn his head to count the droidicas and super battle droids to gouge the positions of the brutal droid bodyguards. He doesn't bother to raise his eyes to meet the cold yellow stare fixed on him through a skull mask of armor blast. He doesn't even need to reach into the Force. He has already let the Force reach into him. The Force flows over him and around him as though he has stepped into a crystal pure waterfall lost in the green coils of a forgotten rainforest. When he opens himself to that sparkling stream, it flows into him and through him and out again without the slightest interference from his conscious will. The part of him that calls itself Obi-Wan Kenobi is no more than a ripple, an eddy in the pool into which he endlessly pours. Okay, we're back. There are other parts of him here as well. There is nothing here that is not a part of him. From the scruff mark on R2-D2's dome to the tattered hem of Palpatine's robe, from the spidering crack in one transparent steel panel of the curving view wall above to get to the great starships that still battle beyond it, because this is all part of the Force. Somehow, mysteriously, the cloud that has darkened the Force for near to a decade and a half has lightened around him now, and he finds within himself the limpid clarity he calls from his school days at the Jedi Temple, when the Force was pure and clean and perfect. It is as though the darkness was withdrawn, has coiled back upon itself to allow him this moment of clarity to return to him the full power of the light. If only for the moment, he does not know why, but he is incapable of even wondering in a Force. He is beyond questions. Why is meaningless. It is an echo of the past, for a whisper from the future of all that matters for this infinite now is what and where and who. He is all 16 of the super battle droids gleaming in laser reflective chrome arms loaded with heavy blasters. He is those blasters and he is their targets. He is all 8 destroyer droids waiting with electronic patience within their energy shields, and both bodyguards with every single one of the shivering Neimoidians. He is their clothes, their boots, and even each drop of reptile-scented moisture that rolls off them from the misting sprays that they use to keep their internal temperature down. He is the binders that cuff his hands, and he is the electro staff in the hands of the bodyguard at his back. He's both of the lightsabers that the other droid bodyguard that marches forward to offer to General Grievous, and he is the general himself. He is the general's duranium ribs. He is the beating of Grievous's alien heart. He is the silent pulse of oxygen pumped through his alien veins. He is the weight of 4 lightsabers at the general's belt, and is the greedy anticipation the captured weapons sparked behind the general's eyes. He is even the plan for his own execution simmering within the general's brain. He is all these things, but most important, he is still Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is why he can simply stand, why he can simply wait, but he has no need to attack or to defend. There will be battle here, but he is perfectly at ease, perfectly content to let the battle start when it will start, and let it end when it will end, just as he will let himself live or let himself die. This is how great Jedi makes war. General Grievous lifted the 2 lightsabers, one in each duranium hand, to admire them. By the light of turbo laser flashed outside and said, "Rare trophies these. The weapon of Anakin Skywalker and the weapon of General Kenobi. I look forward to adding them to my collection. That that will not happen. I am in control here. The reply came through Obi-Wan's lips, but it was not truly Obi-Wan who spoke. Obi-Wan was not in control. He had no need for control. He had the Force. It was the Force that spoke through him. Grievous stalked forward. Obi-Wan saw death in the cold yellow stare through the skull mask's eye holes, and it meant nothing to him at all. There was no death. There was only the Force. He didn't have to tell Anakin to subtly nudge Chancellor Palpatine out of the line of fire. Part of him was Anakin, and was doing this already. He didn't have to tell R2-D2 to access its combat sub-programs and divert power to its booster rockets, claw arm, and cable gun. The part of him that was the little astromech had seen to all these things before they had even entered the bridge. Grievous towered over him. So confident you are, Kenobi. Not confident, merely calm. From so close, Obi-Wan could see the hairline cracks and pitting in the bone-pale mask, and feel the resonance of the general's electrosonic voice humming in his chest. He remembered the question of Master Rule. What is the good, if not the teacher of the bad? What is the bad, if not the task of the good? He said, We can resolve the situation without further violence. I'm willing to accept your surrender. I'm sure you are. The Skullmask tilted inquisitively. Does this preposterous I will accept your surrender line of yours ever actually work? Wait, I'm talking like Watto. Okay, never mind. Sometimes when it doesn't, people get hurt. Sometimes they die. Obi-Wan's blue-gray eyes met squarely those of yellow behind the mask. By people in this case, you should understand that I mean you. I understand enough. I understand, and I will kill you. Grievous threw back his cloak and ignited both lightsabers. Here, now, with your own blade. The Force replied through Obi-Wan's lips. I don't think so. The electro drivers that powered Grievous's limbs could move them faster than the human eye could see. When he swung his arm and his fist, and the lightsaber within it would literally vanish, wiped from existence by sheer mind-numbing speed, an imitation quantum event. No human being could move remotely as fast as Grievous, not even Obi-Wan, but he didn't have to. In the Force, part of him was Grievous's intent to slaughter. His surge from intent to action translated to Obi-Wan's response without thought. He had no need for a plan, no use for tactics. He had the Force. That sparkling waterfall coursed through him, washing away any thought of danger or safety, or winning or losing. The Force, like water, takes on the shape of its container without effort, without thought. The water that was Obi-Wan poured itself into the container that was Grievous's attack, and while some materials might be watertight, Obi-Wan had yet to encounter any that were entirely, as it were, Force-tight. While the intent to swing was still forming in Grievous's mind, the part of the Force that was Obi-Wan was also the part of the Force that was R2-D2, as well as an internal fusion welder Anakin had retrofitted into R2-D2's primary grappling arm, and so there was no need for actual communication between them. It was only Obi-Wan's personal sense of style that brought his customary gentle smile to his face and his customary gentle murmur to his lips. R2. Even as he opened his mouth, the panel was sliding aside in the little droid's fuselage. By the time the droid's nickname had left his lips, the fusion welder had deployed and fired a blinding spray of sparks hot enough to melt uranium. And in a quarter of a second, while even Grievous's electronically enhanced reflexes had him startled and distracted, the part of the Force that was Obi-Wan tried a little trick, a secret one that it had been saving up for such an occasion as this. Because all there on the bridge was one in the Force. From the gross structure of the ship itself to the quantum dance of the electron shells of individual atoms, and because, after all, the nerves and muscle of the bio-droid general were creations of electronics and uranium, not not living tissue with will of its own. It was just barely possible that with exactly the right twist of his mind in that one vulnerable quarter of a second while Grievous was distracted, flinching backward from a spray of flame hot enough to burn even his armored body. Obi-Wan might be able to temporarily reverse the polarity of the electro drivers in the General's mechanical hands, which is exactly what he did. Gareth's stiff fingers sprang open, and 2 lightsabers fell free. He reached through the Force, and the Force reached through him. His blade flared to life while still in the air. It flipped toward him as he lifted his hands to meet it. Its blue flame flashed between his wrists and severed the binders before the hand grip smacked solidly into his palm. Obi-Wan was so deep in the Force that he wasn't even surprised it had worked. He made a quarter turn to face Anakin, who was already in the air, having leapt simultaneously with Obi-Wan's gentle murmur, because Obi-Wan and Anakin were after all 2 parts of the same thing. Anakin's flip carried him over Obi-Wan's head at the perfect range for Obi-Wan's blade to flick out and burn through his partner's binders, and while Grievous was still flinching away from the fountain of fusion fire, Anakin landed with his own hand extended. Obi-Wan felt the liquid surge in the waterfall that he was, and Anakin's lightsaber sank through the air, and Anakin caught it. And so, 1 single second after Grievous had begun to summon the intent to swing, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin stood back to back in the center of the bridge, expressionlessly staring past the snarling blue energy of their lightsabers. Obi-Wan regarded the general without emotion. "Perhaps you should reconsider my offer." Grievous braced himself against the control console, its Darcy housing buckling under his grip. "This is my answer." He ripped the console wholly into the air, right out from under the hands of the astonished Nemoidian operator, raised it over his head, and hurled it at the Jedi. They split, rolling out of the console's way as it crashed to the deck, spitting smoke and sparks. "Open fire!" Grievous shook his fist as though each held a Jedi's neck. "Kill them! Kill them all!" For 1 more second, there was only the scuttle of priming levers on dozens of blasters. 1 second after that, the bridge exploded into a firestorm. Grievous hung back, crouching, watching for a moment as his 2 Magna Guards waded into the Jedi, electrostaffs whirling through the blinding hail of blaster fire that ricocheted around the bridge. Grievous had fought Jedi before, sometimes even in open battle, and he had found that fighting anyone Jedi was much like fighting any other. Kenobi, though, the ease with which Kenobi had taken command of this situation was frightening. More frightening was the fact that of the 2, Skywalker was reportedly the greater warrior. Even their R2 unit could fight. The little astromech had some kind of aftermarket cable gun it had used to entangle the legs of a super droid and yank it off its feet, and now it was jerking the droid this way and that so that its armed cannons were blasting chunks off its squad mates instead of the Jedi. Grievous was starting to think less about winning this particular encounter than about surviving it. Let his Magna Guards fight the Jedi. That's what they were designed for, and they were doing their jobs well. IG-101 had pressed Kenobi back against the console, lightning blazing from his electrostaff's energy shield, where it pushed on Kenobi's blade. The Jedi General might have died then and there, except that one of the simple-minded super battle droids turned both armed cannons on his back, giving Kenobi the chance to duck and allow the hammering blaster bolts to slam 101 stumbling backward. Skywalker had stashed the Chancellor somewhere. That sniveling coward Palpatine was probably trembling under one of the control consoles and had managed to sever both of 102's legs below the knee, which for some reason he apparently expected to end the fight. He seemed to completely astonished when 102 whirled nimbly on one of his electrostaff and used the stumps of his legs to thump Skywalker so soundly that Jedi went down skidding. On the other hand, Grievous thought, this might be salvageable after all. He tapped his internal comm extra sensor to the General Droid command frequency. "The Chancellor is hiding under one of the consoles. Quad 16, find him, and deliver him to my escape pod immediately. Squad 8, stay on mission, kill the Jedi." Then the ship bucked, sharper than it ever had, and the view wall panels whited out as radiation scatter sleeted through the bridge. Alarm klaxons flared. The nav console flared sparks into the face of a Nemoidian pilot, setting his uniform on console and adding his screams to the din. And another console exploded, ripping the newly promoted senior gunnery officer into a pile of shredded meat. Grievous thought. In all the excitement he had entirely forgotten about Lieutenant Commander Nita and integrity. The other pilot, the one who wasn't shrieking and slapping at the flames on his uniform until his own hands caught fire, leaned as far away from his screaming partner as his crash webbing would allow and shouted, "General, that shot destroyed the last of the after control cells. The ship is deorbiting. We're going to burn." "Very well," Grievous said calmly. "Stay on course." Now it no longer mattered whether his bodyguards could overpower the Jedi or not. They would all burn together. He tapped his jaw center to the control frequency for the escape pods, and one coded order ensure that his personal pod would be waiting for him with engines hot and systems checks complete. When he looked back to the fight, all he could see of IG-102 was one arm, the saber-cut joint still white-hot. Skywalker was pursuing two super battle droids that had Palpatine by the arms. While Skywalker dismantled the droids with swift cuts, Kenobi was in the process of doing the same to IG-101. Magna Guard was hopping on its one remaining leg, whirling its electro staff with its one remaining arm, and screeching some improbable threat regarding its staff and Kenobi's body cavities. And after Kenobi cut the arm, 101 went hopping after him, still screeching. The droid actually managed to land one glancing kick before the Jedi casually severed its other leg, after which 101's limbless torso continued to writhe on the deck, howling. While both Magna Guards down, all 8 destroyers opened up, and dual cannons erupted gouts of galvanized particle beams. The two Jedi leapt together to screen the Chancellor, and before Grievous could command the destroyers to cease fire, the Jedi had deflected enough of the bolts to blow apart 3/4 of the remaining super battle droids and send the survivors scurrying for cover beside what was left of the cringing Nemoidians. The destroyers began to close in, hosing down the Jedi with heavy fire, advancing step-by-step cannons against lightsabers. The Jedi caught every blast and sent them back against the destroyer's shields that flared in spherical halos. As they absorbed the reflected bolts, the destroyers might very well have prevailed over the Jedi, except for one unexpected difficulty: gravity shear. All 8 of them suddenly seemed inexplicably to leap into the air, followed by Skywalker and Palpatine, and chairs and pieces of Magna Guards, and everything else on the bridge that was not bolted to the deck, except for Kenobi, who managed to grab a control console and I was hanging by one hand, upside down, still effortlessly deflecting blaster bolts. The surviving Nemoidian pilot was screaming orders for the droids to magnetize. They started howling that the ship was breaking up, and managed to make so much of an annoying noise that Grievous smashed his skull out of his simple irritation. Then he looked around and realized he'd just killed the last of his crew. All the bridge crew he hadn't slain personally had sucked up the bulk of the random blaster ricochets. Grievous shook the pilot's brains off his fist. Disgusting creatures, Nemoidians. The invisible plane of altered gravity passed over the biodroid general without effect. His talons of magnetized uranium kept him right where he was, and as one of the Magna Guard's electrostaffs fell past him, his invisibly fast hand snatched it from the air. When another plane of gravity shear swept through the bridge, droids, Chancellor, and Jedi all fell back to the floor, though the droideka, also known as the Destroyer Droid, was the most powerful infantry combat droid in general production. It had one major design flaw: the energy shield that was so effective at stopping blasters, slugs, shrapnel, and even lightsabers was precisely tuned to englobe the droid in a standing position. If the droid was no longer standing, say, if it was knocked down or thrown into a wall, the shield generator could not distinguish a floor or wall from a weapon, and would keep ramping up power to disintegrate the perceived threat until the generator shorted itself out. Between falling to the ceiling, bouncing off it, and falling back to the floor, the sum total output of all the shield generators of Squad 8 was currently one large cloud of black smoke. It was impossible to say which one of them opened fire on the Jedi, and it didn't matter. Inside the 2 seconds, 8 droidkas had become 8 piles of smoking scrap, and 2 Jedi entirely unscathed walked out of the smoke side by side. Without a word, they parted to bracket the general. Grievous clicked the electrostaff's power setting to overload. It spat lightning around him as he lifted it to combat ready. I'm sorry, I don't have time to fight you. It would have been an interesting match, but I have an appointment with an escape pod, and you... He pointed at the transparent steel view wall and triggered his own concealed cable gun, not unlike the one that fancy astromech of theirs had. The cable shot out, and its grappling claw buried itself in one of the panel supports. You, he said, have appointments with death. The Jedi leapt, and Grievous hurled the overloading electrostaff, but not at the Jedi. He threw it at a window. One of the transparent steel panels of the view wall had cracked under a glancing hit from a starfighter's cannon. When the sparking electrostaff hit it squarely and exploded like a proton grenade, the whole panel blew out into space. A hurricane roared to life, raging through the bridge, seizing Neimoidian corpses and pieces of droids and wreckage and hurling them out through the gap along with a white mountain of flash-frozen air. Grievous sprang straight up into the instant hurricane, narrowly avoiding the 2 Jedi, whose leaps had become frantic nut tumbles as they tried to avoid being sucked through along with him. Grievous, though, he had no need to breathe, nor had he any fear of his body fluids boiling in the vacuum. The pressurized synth flashed down and closed the living parts within his droid exoskeleton saw to that, so he simply rode the storm right out into space until he reached the end of the cable. It snapped tight and swung him whipping back toward the invisible hand's hole. He cast off the cable, his hands and feet of magnetized uranium let him scramble along the hole without difficulty. The light spidered curve and course on his night side, whirling around him. He clambered over to the external locks of the bridge escape pods and punched in a command code. Looking back over his shoulder, he experienced a certain and chilly satisfaction as he watched empty escape pods blast free the hands bridge and streak away. All of them, well, all but one. No trick of the Force would spring Kenobi and Skywalker out of this one. It was a shame he didn't have a spy probe handy to leave on the bridge. He would have enjoyed watching the Republic's greatest heroes burn. The iron streaks of the escape pods spiraled through the battle that still flashed and flared silently in the void, pursued by starfighters and armed retrieval ships. Grievous nodded to himself. That should occupy them long enough for his command pod to make the run to his escape ship. As he entered his customized pod, he reflected that he was, for the first time in his career, violating orders, though he was under strict orders to leave the Chancellor unharmed. Palpatine was about to die alongside his precious Jedi. Then Grievous shrugged and sighed. What more could he have done? There was a war on. After all, he was sure Lord Sidious would forgive him. On the bridge, a blast shield had closed over the destroyed transparent steel window, and a free-last surviving combat model droid had been cut to pieces even before the atmosphere had a chance to stabilize. But there was a more serious problem. The bucking of the ship had become continuous. White hot sparks outside streamed backward past the view wall windows. Those sparks, according to the 3 different kinds of alarms that were all screaming through the bridge at once, were what was left of the ablative shielding on the nose of the disabled cruiser. Anakin stared grimly down at a console readout. All the escape pods are gone. Not one left on the whole ship. He looked up at Obi-Wan. We're trapped. Obi-Wan appeared more interested than actually concerned. Well, here's a chance to display your legendary piloting skills, my young friend. You can fly this cruiser, can't you? Flying's no problem. The trick is landing, which, Anakin gave a slightly shaky laugh. Would you know, this cruiser's not exactly designed to do, even when it's in one piece. Everyone looked unimpressed, and so Anakin unstrapped the crash webbing that held the pilot's corpse and pulled the body from its chair. And so you'd better strap in, he said, settling into the chair, his fingers sliding over the unfamiliar controls. The cruiser bounced even harder, and its attitude began to skew as a new klaxon joined the blare of the other alarms. That wasn't me. Anakin jerked his hands away from the board. I haven't done anything yet. It certainly wasn't. Palpatine's voice was unnaturally calm. It seems someone is shooting at us. Wonderful, Anakin muttered. Could this day get any better? Perhaps we could talk with them. Obi-Wan moved over to the comm station and began working a screen. Let them know we've captured the ship. Alright, let's take the comm, Anakin said. He pointed at the co-pilot station. R2, second chair. Chancellor? Yes, strap in now. We're going in hot. Anakin grimaced. The scraps of burning coal flashing past the view wall in more ways than one. The vast battle that had ripped and battered Coruscant space all this long day finally began to flicker out. The shimmering canopy of ion trails and turbo laser bursts was fading into streaks of ships achieving jump as the Separatist strike force fled in full retreat. The light of Coruscant's distant star splintered through the iridescent clouds of gas crystals that were the remains of starfighters and of pilots. Damaged cruisers limped toward the space yards, passing shattered hulks and that hung dead in the infinite day that is in planetary space. Prize crews took command of surrendered ships, imprisoning the living among their crews and affixing restraining bolts to the droids. The dayside surface of the capital planet was shrouded in smoke from a million fires touched off by meteorite impacts of ship fragments. Far too many had fallen to be tracked and destroyed by the planet's surface defense umbrella. The night-side sheet of artificial lights faded behind the red-white glow from craters of burning steel. Each impact left a caldera of unimaginable death in the skies of Coruscant now. The important vessels were no longer warships, but were instead the fire suppression and rescue craft that crisscrossed the planet. Now one last fragmentary ship screamed into the atmosphere, coming in too fast, too steep, pieces breaking off to spread apart and stream their own contrails of superheated vapor. Banks of turbo lasers on the surface defense towers isolated their signature, and starfighters whipped into interception courses to thin out whatever fragments of the SD tower might miss. And far above, beyond the atmosphere, on the bridge of RSS Integrity, Lieutenant Commander Lorth Nita spoke urgently to a knee-high blue ghost scanned into existence by the phased array lasers in a holocom, an alien in Jedi robes, with bulging eyes set in a wrinkled face and long, pointed, oddly flexible ears. You have to stand down the surface defense system, sir. It's General Kenobi, Nita insisted. His code verifies Skywalker's with him, and they have Chancellor Palpatine. Heard and understood this is... The Jedi responded calmly. Tell me what they require. Nita glanced down at the boil of hull plating that was burning off the falling cruiser, and even as he looked, the ship broke in half at the hangar deck. I'm guessing that's Yoda, guys. Don't. This is not part of the book, but I'm guessing that's Yoda, because heard and understood this is backwards. Even as he looked, the ship broke in half at the hangar deck. The rear half tumbled, exploding in sections, but Laura's flying the front half must have been one of the greatest pilots Nita had ever even heard of. The front half wobbled and slewed, but somehow righted itself into using nothing but a bank of thrusters and its atmospheric drag fins. First, a flight of fire ships, Nita said, more calmly now. If they don't get the burn-off under control, there won't be hole enough left to make the surface, and a hardened docking platform, the strongest available, they won't be able to set it down. This won't be a landing. It will be a controlled crash. Repeat, a controlled crash. Heard and understood. This is the holographic Jedi repeated. Crossload, their transponder signature. When this was done, the Jedi gave approval. Thank you, Lieutenant Commander. valiant service for the Republic you have done today, and the gratitude of the Jedi Order you've earned. Yoda out. On the bridge of integrity, Lord Nita now could only stand and watch, hands clasped behind his back. Military discipline kept him expressionless but pale. Bands began at his knuckles and spread whiteness nearly to his wrist. Every bone in his body ached with helplessness because he knew that that fragment of a ship was a death trap. No one could land such a hulk, not even Skywalker. Each second that passed before its final breakup and burn was a miracle in itself, a testament to the gifts of a pilot who was justly legendary. But when each second is a miracle, how many of them can be strung together in a row? Lord Nita was not religious, nor was he a philosopher or a metaphysician. He knew of the Force only by reputation, but nonetheless, now he found himself asking the Force in his heart that when the fiery end came for the men in that scrap of a ship, it might at least come quickly. His eyes stung. The irony of it burned the back of his throat. The home fleet had fought brilliantly, and the Jedi had done their superhuman part. Against all odds, the Republic had won the day. Yet this battle had been fought to save Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. They had won the battle, but now as Nita stood watching helplessly, he couldn't help feeling that they were about to lose the war. This is Anakin Skywalker's masterpiece. But many people he say he's the best star pilot in the galaxy, but that's merely talk, born of the constant holonet references to his unmatched string of kills in starfighter combat. Blowing up vulture droids and tri-fighters is simply a matter of superior reflexes and trust in the Force. He has spent so many hours in the cockpit that he wears a Jedi starfighter like clothes. It's his own body with thrusters for legs and cannons for fists. What he is doing right now transcends mere flying the way Jedi combat transcends a schoolyard scuffle. He sits in a blood-spattered, blaster-chopped chair behind a console he's never seen before. A console with controls designed for alien fingers. The ship he's in is not only bucking like a maddened dewback through brutal coils of clear air turbulence. It's on fire and breaking up like a comet ripping apart as it crashes into a gas giant. He has only seconds to learn how to maneuver an alien craft that not only has no aft control cells, but has no aft at all. This is what's put simply impossible. It can't be done. He's going to do it anyway because he's Anakin Skywalker and he doesn't believe in impossible. He extends his hands and for one long moment he merely strokes controls, feeling their shape under his fingers, listening to the shivers his soft touch brings to each remaining control surface of the disintegrating ship, allowing the resonance to join inside his head until they resolve into harmony like a Pharaohan joy harp virtuoso checking the tuning of his instrument. And at the same time he draws power from the Force. He gathers perception and luck and sucks it into himself. The instinctive preconscious. What will happen in the next 10 seconds? Intuition that has always been the core of his talent. Then he begins. On the downbeat, atmospheric drag fins deploy as he tweaks their angles and cycles them in and out to slow the ship's descent without burning them all off together. Their contrabass roar takes on a punctuated rhythm like a heart that skips an occasional beat. The forward attitude thrusters damaged in the ship-to-ship battle now fire in random directions, but he can feel where they're taking him, and he strokes them in sequence, making their song the theme of his impromptu concerto. And the true inspiration, the sparking grace note of genius that brings his masterpiece to life is the soprano counterpoint, a syncopated sequence of exterior hatches in the outer hull sliding open and closed and open again, subtly altering the aerodynamics of the ship to give it just exactly the amount of side slip or lift or yaw to bring the huge half cruiser into the approach cone of a pinpoint target an eighth of the planet away. It is the force that makes this impossible, and more than the force, Anakin has no interest in serene acceptance of what the force will bring. Not here, not now, not with the lives of Palpatine and Obi-Wan at stake. It's just the opposite. He seizes upon the force with a stark refusal to fail. He will land the ship. He will save his friends. Between his will and the will of the force, there is no contest. And that is it. And the next part is called part 2. It's called Seduction, which I can't wait to continue reading. And this was a long one. My throat is dry. I'm going to just drink a bunch of water now. My thoughts about it was how we got more of Obi-Wan's thoughts. I like that. Obi-Wan is such an important character to the Star Wars saga. He's not as important as Anakin, but he's important to be part of it enough to be a main character. So I think since he is part of this, I think it'd be great. I think it's great. There's my stuff. Let me change this text to okay. Where's the and sign? And 6 for now. And so I thought that it was great. I thought that we got more of Obi-Wan's thoughts, Anakin's thoughts, and we got a little bit more out of Grievous. I know in the Clone Wars he's supposed to be a main character, but he still wasn't from what I've seen so far. I can't wait to continue reading that book. And honestly, I think that this Star Wars timeline with all these Legends books is all one simple timeline, right? All these books just add up to make it look like it's all happening. All of this is happening at once, like every single day of the Star Wars saga from episode 1 all the way to episode 9 of the Star Wars saga, and every single show and everything. I am getting excited to continue going. I don't know how long this video is, but I'm just gonna upload it raw because there's no point in editing this. I think that chapter 7 was good. All these chapters are good. Matthew Stover is a great author. This is approved by George Lucas. He had to write this so many times, I heard. Because until he got an approved one that he wrote in his own mind, that George Lucas is approved by George Lucas, meaning this is exactly what George Lucas wanted, but also what Matthew Stover liked. And he's such a good author that I feel like the other authors that are there that there is there's James Luceno, Mike Chen, R.A. Salvatore, Terry Brooks, and then there's Donald F. Glutt and James Caan. Those are the episode 5 and 6 writers. I have episode 4, 5, and 6. I'm gonna upload that video as well. It was on my phone. I think I'm gonna download that to my Google Drive so I can email myself on my PC to upload it. But I think that this was good, and I hope you guys enjoyed. See you guys next one. Peace.